Hello, I'm Annie Davey. I've been telling Bible stories to children for many years, and I've got some lovely ones to tell you from the New Testament in this section here. If you want to know about the background, where I got some of the background detail from, you can look it up on the web on truthortradition.com or www.korky.info, where we've written a book called Jesus, Faith and Fact. So it's all in there somewhere, but there's some interesting things here which you may not know. You may think you do know the stories, but wait and see. So let's see what we've got. Hello. I've got a brilliant story for you today. I wonder if you ever watch the programme on television called Britain's Got Talent. Some amazing acts on there. And a few years ago now, a young woman was on there, a girl, and she had a little dog called Pudsey. And Pudsey won the competition. And he was just so obedient. She got him to do all sorts of things, all sorts of tricks. She taught him very patiently. It took a lot of patience. But she had a talent for training a dog. And this year, it was a man called Viggo Venn. And I thought to myself, what's he doing winning a Britain's Got Talent competition? Because he's Norwegian. But he was very funny, and he's a clown. He made everybody laugh. And he did it in English. I suppose that counts as British enough. But he's a very funny man. And everybody's got a talent in some way, haven't they? And Jesus told a story about a man who was going to go away to a far country to be made a king. And it was a parable. Now, you know, a parable is a story with a hidden meaning. And in fact, he was talking about himself, that he was going to be the king in heaven, the King of Kings. But his disciples didn't know that at the time. He had to let them work it out. So I'm telling you the secret so that you can see how he works it through in the story. And he said to them, once upon a time, there was a very, very rich man. And he was going to be going to a far country for some time where he would be made king. And he called 3 of his trusted servants to him. And he said to them, now, I'm going to be away quite a while, and I've got some things which something I'd like you to do for me. And so he took out a bag with the first one, and out of it he took 5 gold coins, which were called talents. And each of these was worth a year's wages. Wow. Well, if you drive a bus in Bristol, that gets you 27,000 a year. So it would be 5 lots of 27. I'm no good at doing maths, but anyway, here they are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lots of gold coins, 5 years' wages. And he said, while I'm away, I want you to see what you can do. Look after it for me. You know what I mean? So the chap said, yes, he'd do that. A bit amazed at being given that. Here is his ear. These aren't hot air balloons. So he was given 5 gold coins, 5 talents. And then the next one he called to him, he said, and I've got a job for you too. And he gave him 2 talents, 2 years' wages. That's pretty good, wasn't it? And he said, do what you can, see what you can do. So he said, well, yes, sir, thank you very much, sir. It's quite a responsibility, but I'll have a go. And then the last one, he knew it wasn't terribly bright, but he thought, well, I'll give him a try anyway. And he only gave him one talent. And he said, now look after it for me, see what you can do. Oh, he said, I will, but it's quite a responsibility, and I'm not, well, okay, yes, thank you. So, off he went to the far country to be made king. And the first one decided he was going to do something with it. See what this says up here, shall we? Shall we read that together? Whatever you do, do your very best. It's from a book in the Old Testament called Ecclesiastes, verse 10 of chapter 9, Ecclesiastes 9:10. Whatever you do, do your very best. When I was going to have my first baby, somebody at the college that I was at gave me a cartoon that she'd drawn of me hanging out the nappies, and underneath it said Ecclesiastes 9:10. Whatever you do, do your very best. Well, it was quite funny, that one. I've never forgotten it, obviously. And that baby is now 55, so quite a long time ago. And so when he came back, this rich man, now king, said to the first man, we called them together, and he said, well, what have you been doing? How have you been getting on? And he said, well, sir, I thought I'm going to have to do something with this money of yours, sir. So he said, I think you'd be very pleased because I've doubled it. How many is 5 2s? 10. And so he brought out his bag, and in his bag he'd got not 5, but 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He doubled that money. So he was giving the king back 10 years' wages, not just 5. Wasn't that amazing? He must have worked really hard. And then he said to the second one, and how did you get on? He said to the first one, that's really good. He said, I'll tell you what, you'll be with me in heaven eventually. We're going to have a great party one of these days. So he was obviously very happy. And the second one, he said, and how did you get on? He said, well, sir, I worked quite hard. I had this idea, you see, and he told him what he'd done. And he said, I've actually doubled your money as well. So how many he got? He got 2 2s are 1, 2, 3, 4. He got 4 talents. He doubled the money. Wow, that really took some doing. So he said, right, he said, you'll be there with me in heaven eventually too. We'll have a great party. Great, well done. And then he said to the last one, and how did you get on? And he said, well, sir, he said, I knew that you were a hard man and that you make money without trying at all. So I was a bit worried about it. So he said, what I did was, he said, well, I'll go and get it. And what he'd done was he'd taken the coin away, he'd dug a hole in the garden, he'd wrapped it up in a cloth and he'd put it in the hole and covered it up, put a stick in it, and then went sat under a tree and went back to sleep. The whole time that rich man was away, he hadn't bothered to do anything with it at all. And so he said, I'll just go and get it. So he went off, and thankfully the stick was still in place that he'd marked the place with, and he dug it up, and he brought back this grotty, dirty old bit of cloth, and he unwrapped it carefully. He said, oh yeah, it's still here, it's still here, it's here. You can have it back. And the king was so angry. He said, you scoundrel, you lazy toad. He said, you've just said that I am a hard man and that I make money, but I expected you to do something with it. You could at least have taken it to the bank and got some interest on it. Get out of my sight. And he took the 1 coin that had been given to that man and he gave it to the one who had 10. So he ended up with 11. And this man was told to leave and go, and he wasn't happy at all. But he didn't deserve anything, did he? He hadn't bothered. And you know, some years ago, I used to do an assembly at Ravenswood School near Nailsea. And there was a boy there who was going to have to leave school, and he couldn't read or write. He tried very hard. He had special needs. And he tried very hard, but he just seemed to couldn't get hold of it somehow. And all the teachers and his parents thought, oh dear, what are we going to do with him? How is he going to survive? Will he ever get a job? But a local baker heard about him and said, well, he can come and sweep up in the bakery if you like. So they put him in a white coat and he swept up really well. But every time he had any time off, they found him looking over the shoulder of the lady who was putting the jam in the jam sponges, in the cakes. And he looked longingly at her for so often. They thought, well, why don't we let him have a go at that himself? So they put it on, had to have a hairnet on, because if you're working with food, you mustn't get any hair in the cakes or anything. And they showed him how to do it with a special palette knife and the jam and the cakes. And he learned how to put the jam in the cakes. And he was so happy, you wouldn't believe it. And that became his job. He was the chief jam putter in cakes. And he earned his own way. And it turned out that his grandfather, years ago, had been a master baker. So somewhere in him was this talent for doing things, making cakes look really good. And so you might think that wasn't much of a talent, but it was something that he could do. And my friend Mike Clark, he's been quite poorly for a long time, but he says he can sit behind a camera and press a button. So he's the one who films these wonderful stories for me, and he edits them and puts them on YouTube so that you can watch them. So he may feel he hasn't got a talent, but to me, it's worth more than its weight in all this gold put together, because he's helping me so much. And when I was young, I wasn't very good at maths, you can tell. But I was good at drawing, and I had great fun drawing. And often God develops the things that you have into something that you can use, which is useful to a whole lot of people. And it gives me pleasure, and I hope it gives you pleasure too. But I think it gives God pleasure too, that I'm using the talents I have there. And he gave me other talents, and I try to use them too. I do baking and gardening, and I've enjoyed having daughters. They were fun to bring up, children I love. God gives each of us something that we're good at. And even if it seems to you that it's insignificant and it doesn't matter very much, in fact, it has its place in God's scheme of things. He has a plan for each one of us. So I'm ending up by putting this down here. Let's see what this says. Can you guess what it says already? Shall we read it together? You've got talent. You've got talent. There's something in you you're really good at and that you really enjoy. We have to work at the things that we don't enjoy as well. There's no good going through life not being able to do things because we haven't tried. God doesn't like that, does he? We've got to have a go. We've got to develop what we call a can-do attitude. I can have a go. I can try. I can try very hard. So whatever you do your very best, and God will be pleased with you. I think that's a fabulous idea. I wanted God to be pleased with me, and that's why I decided to follow him and to learn all I could about him. And I love sharing these stories about him with you. And I hope you enjoy listening and enjoy learning about him too, and that one day maybe you'll decide to follow him too. God bless you, and thank you for listening.